You've had your coffee, you've gone for your morning jog, and it's time to tune in here because we've got 15 great Steam games on sale to talk about. Let's get started. Starting off with number 15, it's Dredge. You can get the Lovecraftian fishing and loneliness simulator for just around $13 because it's 50% off. It successfully manages to make a game about fishing terrifying. It's a great little game that manages to be really addicting while always disturbing you on some level, even as it gets better. In some ways, it starts to feel progressively more serious. Like if you're here for a fishing game, you get plenty of that, but you get this oppressive undercurrent that really progressively becomes much more than an undercurrent. What's really cool is the process of upgrading your ship, handling your inventory like a Resident Evil game so you can get more storage, better equipment. Then when you get that better equipment, you can fish in more dangerous areas. The game does a good job of teaching you the gameplay loop, giving you better equipment, and then using that equipment to up the ante. This is one of those games that I think some people might find polarizing because on one end, it's a pretty relaxing fishing sim, but very quickly, it becomes something much different, darker. It's not a bad thing though. It's a really interesting little horror game in the sense that it's got its own take on things. A little adventure, a little mystery. I don't think you're going to see too many fishing horror sims on the market or even free games of that ilk, so hey, give it a look. Moving on to number 14, it Still Wakes the Deep. This game is 50% off as well, bringing it to around $17. Still Wakes the Deep is about an oil rig. A gory human transformation slosh as part of gameplay that is thankfully not overly long. Somewhere between 4 and 5 hours, it takes a survival horror premise and puts it on an oil rig. It a little bit goes further into it's not a game you fight back in. There are even choices that you make as you progress that do affect some things in the game, some things in the story, but it is by no means like a choice mechanic game. There are just some changes that happen based on a few key choices. They are for the most part more like very contextual. Contextual in story rather than contextual in gameplay, but I definitely consider that a positive. The story is well told. It's not super scary. To be frank, you kind of know what's going on, but at the same time, it's like there's a lot of interesting elements that perhaps aren't full stop scary, but like make you feel claustrophobic in a good way. The design of the oil rig is very good. The open oceans around it look very good as well. It's a very evocative environment. Don't go in thinking like you're gonna get the scariest thing in the world, but it's very good horror. It's not the longest game, but with the discount, it's priced proportionally, and I would say good for that amount of money. Moving on to number 13, it's the Outlast Trials, which is currently 60% off and is under $16. It's no secret that I've been a fan of Outlast for a while. The first two games, in my opinion, are survival horror games done exactly how I want them to be. They're terrifying but accessible, manages to up the scares without getting too frustrating as the game goes on, and the Outlast Trials kind of follows in their tracks after a fashion. This one takes on the sort of the asymmetrical multiplayer. They sell games like Dead by Daylight or Friday the 13th. There's no antagonist like another player. You're working against the environment with some kind of unique stuff that I think makes it a pretty fun game. It's also multiplayer, but you can play it alone, which is great. I did play a fair amount of it alone, but I also played it with friends. Perhaps not a game I have played as much as, let's say, Dead by Daylight, but with the sale right now, and keep in mind there is a great player base there. This is a scary-ass game that sometimes descends into absolute absurdity. It's got a good progression system, good environments, and some really tense survival conditions. I like it a lot. I definitely think my preference would be the first two games, but that doesn't mean this one isn't worth it. For $16, that's a pretty damn good game. Moving on to number 12, it's Aliens Dark Descent, another game that's been marked down 60% to under $16. When I saw the words Alien and Dark Descent, my first thought was not squad-based tactical game. I envisioned more of an Alien Isolation deal. It's not that. It is a kind of interesting mishmash. It's not quite squad tactics. It's pretty different in that, for instance, you only control one reticle that moves the entire squad. So you're essentially moving around the map by an action of the mouse without really having to control multiple units. To be clear, however, it's not just an RTS. There's tactical elements, a lot of stuff that we're very used to seeing in things that are XCOM-y without it being fully an RTS or fully an XCOM-y. I mean, obviously, it's not obviously XCOM-y, or I'd be able to just clearly say it's that. It's either a slower-paced RTS or an RTS-inflected squad-based tactical game where you're controlling squad as more of one unit. Whichever way you want to look at it, personally, it kind of depends on the mood. Sometimes I would call it a more slow, more technical RTS, and sometimes I would say it's a weird squad-based RTS. It's an innovative game that captures quite a bit of the dread, the scariness, a lot of the tension of the Aliens movies, not necessarily just Alien or Aliens or Aliens 3. Frankly, in some ways it kind of builds a zone out of a lot of the elements. It's not a particularly long game. With that in mind, 16 bucks is a very good price for this game. When it was 40, maybe not. Some of the emerging elements are there in a small capacity, but it's never going to be like one of these games where you talk about two different playthroughs. Having that is necessary comparable. Even if it's a good bargain, it's just not really what it is, but it's a good price. It's a good enough game that I'd say certainly pick it up at 16 bucks. Moving on to number 11, it's Rungor, a game that is 60% off, bringing it to just about 6 bucks even. The best way to describe Rungor is Slay the Spire on methamphetamines. It's a roguelike auto-dungeon battler with a very distinct difference. You don't play one card at a time, you just play as many as you want, as fast as you want. It makes for this interesting tactical game that basically plays like a rhythm game. In other words, Rungor is a complete spastic mess, and I love it. It's chaotic. It's a game where you can instantly get yourself killed if you play the wrong card at the wrong time, but it has built in all the stuff that Slay the Spire has, like artifacts and cards that you pick up after beating enemies. The cards you start with only do really basic stuff like attack and defend, but as you keep playing, you find more useful or niche cards, and then you start building your deck and create synergies. There's a lot of classes. They're all pretty different from each other. The entire game looks like this big, unformatted Excel chart. It's a pretty clear parody that somehow still ends up being a pretty decent game despite its pretty intentionally aesthetic of looking like mostly nothing. The novelty does kind of wear off after a while, but it's still a really fun game to just jump into every once in a while. It's a game that's a really hard sell on its own. If you're watching the video and you're going like, that looks chaotic and crazy, which yes it is, but if you're not sure, trying it at 6 bucks isn't a big decision. Moving on to number 10, it's A Plague Tale Requiem, which is currently 65% off, bringing it to about 18 to 19 bucks. It is the sequel to A Plague Tale Innocence, which is also on sale and actually at a steeper discount. It's 80% off. I believe it's around 8 bucks at that price. If you haven't played either, however, I would recommend getting them in a bundle, which is at 65% off. Fit them at a better price than if you get them a la carte here. There are two really good games here. They are stealth-based games that kind of simultaneously feel like thirds and also very reminiscent of specifically the original Assassin's Creed, like not in open-world mechanics or side quests or anything. The games continue to have a linear story, a plot that moves from beginning to end. Some would say, although there's clear similarities to Assassin's Creed, when I say the original Assassin's Creed, and I'm going to specify two things. One, the aesthetic, and two, the way the stealth works. It primarily focuses on people stealth, not like a walk-through rat or something. It's also by no means Assassin's Creed for anyone who hasn't played the games. It might be a little much to say that. There are things that when I'm playing these games I think, you know what, it's a little reminiscent of the original Assassin's Creed, which as everybody knows is my favorite of the Assassin's Creed. But I'm saying in this case there's some specific cues that I'm seeing in play that I really like about the original, and to an extent the second. Moving on to number 9, it is the new Lords of the Fallen. Not Lords of the Fallen that came out a couple of years ago. Lords of the Fallen that came out last 2023 is 67% off, making its price just over 20 bucks. This is actually a pretty solid Souls-like. Clearly heavily inspired by Dark Souls, but certainly has enough going on that makes it a unique entity. It's very pretty. Some of the best environments I've seen in the genre, at least outside of From Software stuff, and kind of outside of what From Software typically does. We don't see this kind of gothic environment rendered this well, and not just that, repeat the structure of the game. Like there's a great selection of environments. Character is highly customizable. It's got the multiple timelines thing, and there's a lot of secrets. It's just a very fun game. It's not the kind of thing that's completely redefining the genre, but it's just a good, solid, fun time, kind of not upending any of its conventions either though. Honestly, I'd say it's among the best of the From Software knockoffs. It's not an easy game. It's not super hard either. It's really like if you've played a few of these games, it's just a good, solid game. At 20 bucks, it's a really solid buy. Moving on to number 8, it's Bendy and the Dark Revival, the semi-famous sequel to the semi-famous original indie horror Bendy and the Ink Machine. The Dark Revival has it at 67% off, bringing it right to about 10 bucks. It's not exactly Slender Man for this era's young teens, but it's probably as close as they were going to get to it. Got the right amount of internet fun and weird lore to excite that crowd. And don't get me wrong, I know there's a lot of adults that are also into the bendy games. I'm someone who thinks the original game was really fun, whereas Dark Revival actually improves on a lot of what it's doing while also kind of splitting the difference between doing that and tremendously frustrating me. Like, they make bendy a fun game in a lot of ways. They've replaced mindless wandering with objectives and exploration puzzles. Honestly, the entire thing's much more cohesive than the original. Also, much more graphically impressive, and enemies are more persistent and intelligent. There's actual boss fights. It certainly feels like a much greater mix of stealth and action than the original. It has new weapons and a bunch of new moves to deal with enemies. It has more of a story. It's presented in an idiosyncratic way, but it's fun even if it doesn't make total sense. It does not end well, but the vast majority of the game is a pretty fun, cartoony jump scare em-up. I would say if you're more serious about horror, you're probably not going to love it. I don't think there's anything wrong with a campy cartoon aesthetic, but it also isn't scary. Like, it's jump scary. It's not jump scary because it's legitimately scary and increases tension. It just tells you, like, jump scare and then jump scares you. If you're looking for a full entry in the new genre of Freddy-likes best represented by Poppy and Security Breach, 10 bucks is very worth it. Moving on to number 7, it's The Pedestrian, a pretty damn brilliant little puzzle game that's 75% off, bringing it to 5 bucks. Basically, you play as this little stick man, and you're exploring these little connected signs and pictures. You gotta rearrange things in order to connect things with ladders and doors. It's a real one-of-a-kind puzzle game, but it's only about 4 hours in length, so you probably want to get it at a discount. The game isn't for everybody. It's probably not something I'd play through repeatedly. In fact, of the games on this list, it's probably the one I'd be least likely to replay with the unknowns of the puzzles known. Once they're known, there's nothing really else to discover because, I mean, it's a very straightforward game. It's just a series of puzzles. There's also people that wouldn't have to wait for a discount on something like this. The people that know that they like this type of game. Like, if you're more metropolitan, you're more likely to have seen the little stick figure that looks a lot like the main character. Maybe you have a soft spot in your heart for that little symbol man running across electronic walk signs. So if you've lived a long time in the city, and you've never had trouble figuring out where you are on those confusing little maps that seem to pop up everywhere that are meant to be helpful, but typically are confusing, then you probably don't even need the discount to know you'd love this.
It is so fast! We'll dine on meals. We'll make it out of this hell together.
Moving on to number 6, it's Amnesia: The Bunker, a sequel to one of the scariest games. I mean, the original Amnesia was an out-and-out hit. There's no two ways about it, and Amnesia: The Bunker is a strong entry into the genre and the series, especially for the price. A 75% discount, bringing it down to 7 bucks. We've got a game that doesn't take a huge amount of time to play through, but in my opinion, has a ton of replay value. It's actually a lot more different than the original Amnesia compared to the other sequels. Feels more of an actual sequel by evolving the gameplay. It's sort of more in a Resident Evil 7 type formula, got a small but interconnected area with true horror game vibes, an old bunker, no hand-holding, resource managing, and a monster that acts more like something from Alien Isolation instead of being more scripted like stuff from Resident Evil. It's very intense. There really is a monster you can never be comfortable around. Going into the more complex areas feels like slowly going through a minefield. It's very well crafted. I think a bit of a shame this one isn't a little bit longer. It's one of those games where, yeah, I've played it and beat it. I feel like there's still stuff I want to do even though I did stuff. Ah man, it's a really good game, and it's definitely worth the 7 bucks in my opinion.
The truth is, even after I inherited the house, I never thought I'd come back to it.
Moving on to number 5, it's What Remains of Edith Finch, a game that's been down marked 75%, so it's 5 bucks. Honestly, I think that it's worth 5 bucks even if you hate quote-unquote walking simulators. It is a walking simulator or an interactive movie. Yes, the game is, but there is enough going on in this game mechanically. You don't spend the entire game walking in a house listening to stories. The stories are told from a lot of different perspectives, and they have their own sort of mechanical inflection. It's one of those things where it manages to ascend the genre without leaving the genre, and I love it for that. It's short, yes, but it's a very deliberately and lovingly crafted story that I think it's got a lot of respects. It takes full advantage of the medium, actually incorporating its narratives and the game sections you're playing through. Gives you insight into the characters in ways that you really can only do in video games by having storytelling, atmospheric, environmental type storytelling. Like another game where I think that the idea of the walking simulator is 100% defeated is a Firewatch. I think that's another game worth playing and worth playing this along with. I think it's also quite different. It takes advantage of games in a different way, but again, it's in a good way. I really don't have a lot of negative things to say. It does the transitions between kind of like the gameplay and the narrative very seamlessly. I like it a lot. It's an excellent game and well worth the discounted price. Moving on to number 4, it's RoboCop Rogue City, a game that is 80% off right now, bringing it to just $10. It's a steal at this price. RoboCop Rogue City is a fantastic hybrid FPS adventure game. Like, as much as it is a first-person shooter, it's not a game that obsesses over combat. I mean, combat feel is great, being RoboCop is great, but it does a great job integrating RPG mechanics, things that you may find yourself referring to your time playing things like Deus Ex. Obviously, it's not fully that. There are some elements of that. It's also not something I would necessarily call an immersive sim. It is 100% a first-person shooter with a lot of mechanics that integrate into a very big open world. It leans heavily on the RoboCop license, but it does do so in kind of a nostalgia bait kind of way. But it's also good at integrating the nostalgia bait in a way that isn't cumbersome, that doesn't bog down. You're not looking at something and going, wow, they just completely slammed the brakes on this in order to give us fan service. Stuff like that is done in very smart ways. In some ways, it's impressive beyond its very competent and very enjoyable gameplay. It's a game that does take advantage of the feelings one might have from the movies, but also doesn't at all sacrifice the fact that it's a game. It really makes it visible. It's impressive. $10 is nothing for a game like that. It's a really good one. Like, this is a standout. Probably if I'd have to enumerate the games on this list from most to least recommended rather than ordered them by discount, this would be along the top of the list. $10? It's a steal.
Whatever that means.
All right, I'm heading on.
Fine.
Moving into number 3, it's The Gunk. A platforming vacuuming adventure that's 85% off brings it right around $4. It's not a complex game. Maybe not something for the hardcore, but I would not call it a particularly easy game, despite its length and serious lack of challenge. What makes it fun is how immersive it is. This is going to sound weird, but I think of The Gunk as almost a calming or relaxing game. It's engaging. It's not like a game on the equivalent of having music you like playing in the background while you're doing something very different. It's something that's actively very entertaining, but it's not engaged on a level that like really raises your stress or like even makes you feel like you're participating in a big, intense adventure. It really does feel like walking around this alien world and cleaning everything, getting rid of the corruption on the land, watching the greenery come back to life, just a joy to play. It's going to be brutally quick for some chronic sweat, try-hard gamers, but I think it's a great game that if you're having a bit of stress or anxiety, it's a good way to distract yourself from that. I mean, $4, it's a deal. Down at number 2, it's Prey 2017. This game is 90% off and it's going for under $3. It's a crime not to play the game at that price. This game is not for everybody. It's not a game that I think has universal appeal, but it is a game that I think universally everybody should know about. It's sort of that era the immersive sim was at a complete dead end and bump and pause check. Then Prey came along and spurred a mini revival. It may be the best of the genre for some, and it's an immersive sim FPS in the sense of its spiritual predecessors and great games like BioShock, System Shock 2, and Deus Ex. It's very detailed, got an incredibly detailed interconnected station that you can explore at your leisure. I think that it's also a supremely underrated. Its presentation is great. It reminds me a lot of Half-Life in some ways. Not directly, but there's some stuff here and there that I think is really good. At $3, buy the 2017 Prey. I think you should have it even if it's a game you don't feel like diving into right at that moment. For $3, you're losing essentially nothing, and you'll have the game when you're more ready to engage. Finally, coming in at number 1 is Severed Steel, also a game that is 90% off, bringing its price to $250. Severed Steel is fantastic. It is a frenetic first-person shooter that just leans all the way into its strengths. It is wild, jumping, sliding, busting holes in walls, bullet time, slow motion, explosions. It's got an adaptive soundtrack. It's just an onslaught, a thrill ride. In some ways, it reminds me of a good John Wick action sequence, but gone completely off the rails. Sometimes robbing banks, sometimes crawling through enemy bases while it's getting burnt to hell. It's a game that starts off strong and just keeps getting crazier. Ignore the story. It's there. It's not that it's non-existent. It's not a game that's super interested in developing a narrative for you. That's left up to you, the player, as you do some of the most spectacular crap in first-person shooting. In my opinion, this game would probably be worth the full price point, and with 90% off, I mean, this is a pretty damn good game to get for $250. And perhaps, Mr. Prey, you could get them both together for under $6.